Today, I'll introduce a book published in 2023 called Hidden Potential. The subtitle is The Science of Achieving Greater Things. What does potential in the title mean? Many people might have heard from teachers and parents during childhood that your child has great potential. With diligent effort, they could surely get into selective schools. So, what is the underlying message from the teachers? It implies the child is intelligent but lacks effort. Here, the teachers equate potential with innate talent. However, this book argues that it's a common misconception to focus too much on a person's starting point, on immediately visible abilities rather than the hidden potential. So, what stories about hidden potential does this book contain? For example, it talks about an athlete who seemed mediocre but eventually outperformed another athlete considered a genius. Or a person who couldn't learn a second language but later mastered 6 languages within a few years. It even includes a deaf person who became a world-class musician. These examples show that these individuals didn't have obvious advantages in talent, and in some cases, were at a disadvantage. But these stories convey the author's message. Everyone has hidden potential. The key lies in how to unlock it. How much potential you have doesn't depend on how talented you are, but on how far you can go once you start. In recent years, more and more experiments have told us that the so-called geniuses are just illusions. The book describes an experiment where researchers surveyed 120 distinguished individuals, award-winning sculptors, pianists, mathematicians, neuroscientists, and athletes, and found that only a few exhibited extraordinary intelligence or talent during childhood. Most were unremarkable, and some were even initially behind. Therefore, the lead psychologist of the study concluded, any knowledge or skill that one person can learn well in the world means that everyone can learn it well, provided the right learning conditions exist. Today's book, Hidden Potential, helps us uncover how to create these conditions. The author, you might be familiar with, is Adam Grant, a professor at Wharton School and an organizational psychologist. He has written many books, which we have mostly covered, such as Think Again, the most popular success course at Wharton, Option B, and Originals. Grant himself is also worth mentioning. He not only teaches, conducts research, and writes, but is also a popular speaker and hosts 2 podcasts, one monthly and one weekly. It seems he has really tapped into his potential, but I didn't know until reading this book that he is also a national-level diver. We will also talk about how he trained in diving. Thus, the author himself is someone who has fully realized his hidden potential. His advice in this book is not only based on extensive literature reviews, randomized experiments, and quantitative analysis he has conducted, but also on effective practices he has personally experienced. The book begins by discussing personality as a skill. This might sound strange, but let's start with an experiment conducted in Tennessee, USA, involving over 11,000 kindergarten students. Researchers observed how the experience of kindergarten teachers affected the future income of students. They found that students who had more experienced teachers earned significantly more than their peers as adults, with a value added of $320,000 in extra lifetime income attributed to having a teacher above the average experience level. So why does the experience level of kindergarten teachers have such a long-term impact on income? One might first think that experienced teachers could better develop children's cognitive skills, such as numbers, words, and reading. However, the team led by Chetty discovered it wasn't the case. The significant impact experienced teachers had on their students was in their personality development. The key traits affected were proactivity, like asking questions and actively seeking information; sociability, being able to interact and cooperate well with peers; discipline, being able to concentrate effectively in class without disrupting order; and resilience, willingness to persist in the face of challenges and difficulties. Therefore, when children are taught by more experienced teachers, they show better personality traits, which have a more substantial impact on their future income than their math or reading skills, statistically 2.4 times more important. This conclusion might surprise many who have long focused on cognitive skills in early education, but the study highlights that personality development is equally critical. If you have children, you might want to pay attention to nurturing their proactivity, sociability, discipline, and resilience. Another research discussed in the book is in the field of chess. Scholars found that for people just starting to learn chess, being intelligent can indeed speed up the learning process. However, once a player becomes seasoned, intelligence has very little impact on their performance. This is consistent with what was found in the kindergarten experiment. Cognitive abilities provide an early advantage, but this advantage diminishes over time. These experiments tell us that whether a person can excel as they grow older does not depend on talent or cognitive level as many might think. As people age, the importance of personality traits becomes more pronounced because whether you're solving complex problems on a chessboard or facing challenges in your work, personality has a significant impact. But some might ask, I'm already grown up, even middle-aged. Is it too late to develop my personality traits? Over 2 centuries ago, some psychologists proposed that personality becomes fixed like plaster by age 30, making it hard to change. However, recent experiments have shown otherwise. For instance, around 2020, social scientists recruited 1,500 entrepreneurs in West Africa, both men and women aged between 30 and 50. They divided these entrepreneurs into 3 groups. One group was the control group with no interventions. The second group received training focused on cognitive skills like finance, accounting, human resources, and marketing. The third group received training in personality skills, focusing on initiative, discipline, and determination. After the training, these entrepreneurs continued to run their businesses. The result was that the entrepreneurs who received personality skills training saw their company's profits increase by an average of 30% over the next 2 years, 3 times the gain of those who underwent cognitive skills training. Why? Scholars explain that while knowledge might help entrepreneurs seize opportunities, personality lets them create opportunities. They are more proactive in developing creative ideas, introducing new products, and anticipating market changes rather than reacting passively. When they encounter difficulties, they don't give up but think of various ways to overcome them. This experiment, besides once again highlighting the importance of personality skills, also tells us an important thing. It's never too late to develop personality skills. You might have noticed that we've been using the term personality skills and not just personality. That's because this book emphasizes that personality, like skills, is malleable and can be cultivated. And here, personality doesn't mean temperament, which is your innate disposition, but rather your ability to place your values above your instincts. For example, your instinct might be to shrink back or give up when faced with difficulties, but if you've cultivated a resilient personality, it can persuade you to keep going. So, if your innate temperament only allows you to climb the first hill on the road of life, then by developing personality skills, you might be able to climb the second, third, or even more. All right, now that we've clarified the importance of cultivating personality skills, let's talk about which personality skills should be focused on in unlocking hidden potential. First, embracing discomfort is a type of courage. Let's start with a real story. The protagonists are Maria and Benny. They both seem like language geniuses, fluent in 5 or 6 languages, with several more at a conversational level. They also learned these languages in a relatively short time. Maria learned 6 new languages from scratch in less than 10 years. Benny usually takes less than 5 months to learn a language. Were these two naturally gifted with languages? Not really. For instance, Maria studied Spanish for 6 years as a child but still didn't master it. Benny studied Irish for 11 years but couldn't speak it well. So why did they become people who could master foreign languages in a short time after they grew up? We usually think that children learn languages the fastest, but these two, quite the contrary, seem to suddenly unlock the language pathways in their brains after they reached adulthood. How did they do it? After learning about these two people online, the author decided to figure out why. He discovered that the factor that led them to successfully master their first foreign language was not that they overcame some cognitive barrier, but because they started embracing discomfort. For example, Maria initially learned foreign languages by continuously reading books, memorizing words, and doing exercises. But she was afraid to speak because she felt she wasn't ready and feared sounding stupid. So she stayed in her comfort zone, only reading and writing but not speaking. It wasn't until she went to university and studied linguistics that she realized her previous method was wrong. It's like expecting to perform a perfect triple jump in figure skating just by reading about it. It's impossible. If you want to be proficient in a language, you have to speak it loudly. So she started looking for various opportunities to practice speaking, and that's how she eventually mastered Spanish, a language she had struggled with. The book also discusses a new educational trend called the learning styles theory. This theory suggests that if a student finds learning difficult, it's because the current teaching methods don't suit their learning habits. So you should teach them in the ways they are used to and excel in. Learners have been categorized by this theory. For example, visual learners prefer to learn through images, and auditory learners prefer to learn through listening, among others. There are even kinesthetic learners, kinesthetic as in motion, who need to learn through physical activity. This learning styles theory has been quite popular in recent years and seems very advanced. But the author and many experts have found that the emergence of this theory lacks research support. In recent years, specific studies have found that adopting students' preferred learning styles doesn't actually improve their learning outcomes. On the other hand, a more research-supported way to improve learning efficiency is to adopt the most suitable learning method for each learning task. For instance, as we mentioned earlier, learning a language is particularly suitable for vocal practice. If you're learning knowledge that requires strong logical thinking, it's more suitable for written reading, not just listening. So there's a phrase in this book that I think is quite right. It says that those who like the learning styles theory will think that this way of learning is good for this person, and that way of learning is good for that person. But they overlook one thing, which is that the key to learning is not to find the right method for you, or any particular person, but to find the right method for the task itself. And often, the methods that make you uncomfortable are actually the ones that let you progress faster because they stimulate your brain more. Think about it. What's the most comfortable? Of course, zoning out is the most comfortable because your brain is slacking off. So Maria and Benny, these two people, also have a significant trait, which is that they actively seek discomfort. For example, Maria moved to Madrid, took a job teaching English, and chose to live with a family that only spoke Spanish. By the end of that summer, she was able to speak fluent Spanish. Also, Maria's fiancé is Chinese, and his family speaks Cantonese. So she set a challenge for herself, which was to give a toast in Cantonese at their wedding. So this prompted her to crazily learn Cantonese, essentially forcing herself to improve her Cantonese level. Benny's way of embracing discomfort went even further. He would deliberately embarrass himself. Benny was originally not good at socializing, but in order to practice foreign languages, he not only actively greeted and chatted with people in foreign countries, but he even sang local songs to locals. He gave this behavior a very heroic name called social parachuting. Of course, during these interactions, there were many awkward moments, and he made many mistakes, such as using the wrong gender to introduce himself or confusing the word for scenery with buttocks. But Benny was actually happy during these times because he saw each awkward moment and mistake as an opportunity for progress. He even set making mistakes as a goal, like setting himself to make at least 200 mistakes every day. He used the number of mistakes to measure his progress. So the author says, when we start learning a skill, don't always think, I have to be ready before I start using it or practicing it in real situations. If you think that way, you're actually just indulging yourself. You won't wake up one day and suddenly feel ready. The correct approach is what the book writes quite well. We become prepared by taking the leap anyway. It means, don't wait until you're ready to act. It's by acting that you truly get ready. Anyway, just take that first step. Becoming a human sponge. Alright, we just talked about one personality skill, embracing discomfort. Now let's talk about another personality skill, becoming a human sponge. This is also a concept I really liked when I read this book. When you hear sponge, you might first think of the sponges we use for cleaning in the kitchen. But we're not talking about that kind of sponge here, but about a type of animal, one of the oldest animals on Earth. Over 500 million years ago, there was a mass extinction event on Earth that was even more devastating than the dinosaur extinction. At that time, over 3/4 of the species on Earth died, but sponges survived and dominated the oceans. Sponges, which look like bushes, are almost entirely stationary. They don't just absorb things from the outside like kitchen sponges, but also filter out toxins. They absorb water and nutrients through their outer walls, and then eject it through what looks like tiny mouths. This ability to absorb, filter, and adapt allows sponges to thrive in very harsh environments. Some sponges can even live for over 2,000 years. This ability of sponges to absorb, filter, and adapt is also very important for humans. It's not just a metaphor, but a personality skill, an active ability to absorb and filter information around us, which is crucial for unlocking our hidden potential. Next, let's talk about a real-life human sponge story. The protagonist of this story is a javelin athlete named Julius. He grew up in a very poor village in Kenya, Africa. He has loved javelin since he was a child and later joined a professional training team, but his physical condition was not ideal. He was rather thin and small. In contrast, another javelin athlete from Egypt, named Ehab, had excellent physical conditions, tall, strong, and with long, powerful arms. At the beginning, Julius's training and competition performance was much worse than Ehab's, but 8 years later, Julius surpassed Ehab at the 2011 All-Africa Games, winning a gold medal and completing a beautiful comeback. If we look at the performance curves of Julius and Ehab, we'll find that Ehab's initial performance was quite good, but it fluctuated over time. In contrast, Julius's performance steadily improved, which is why he eventually surpassed Ehab. What caused the huge difference in their performance curves? The key lies in the different ways Julius and Ehab absorbed information. Ehab was also hardworking, but he always passively absorbed information, doing whatever his coach told him to do. Julius, on the other hand, took responsibility for his own growth. He not only absorbed his coach's suggestions, but also actively sought out all information that could help him. For example, he would spend a long time watching videos of top javelin athletes on websites, observing their techniques, and then training himself. Throughout his entire athletic career, Julius continued this practice, which is why his improvement was consistent. We mentioned earlier that he surpassed Ehab for the first time in 2011, winning the championship at the All-Africa Games. Later, in 2015, he won the World Javelin Championship. In 2016, despite being injured, he still won a silver medal at the Rio Olympics. So how do you become a human sponge? There are 2 key points. One is whether your way of absorbing information is like Julius's, actively seeking new knowledge instead of passively waiting for others to feed it to you. The second is whether you can effectively filter information. How do you filter information? There's a standard, which is to filter out information that can promote your growth rather than information that makes you feel self-satisfied. For example, If you like to go online to read articles that support your own views, or you like to hear others praise you, these are information that makes you feel self-satisfied. So how do you filter out information that can promote your growth? I picked out a practical suggestion from the book, which is don't ask for feedback, ask for advice. What does that mean? Let's take the author himself as an example. The author's personality is rather introverted. So how did he become a very popular speaker later? He not only used what we mentioned earlier, embracing discomfort, actively starting to speak, and absorbing all kinds of useful information. He also has a practice, which is that after every speech, he doesn't ask others, "Do you think this speech was good?" Instead, he asks, "What do you think I can improve?" This is not asking for feedback, but for advice. This way, you get more constructive answers. This is a sponge-like mindset. That is, don't dwell on what you did wrong in the past, but focus on how you can do better in the future. Being an imperfectionist. All right, we just talked about the personality skill of becoming a human sponge. Now let's look at another personality skill, being an imperfectionist. When it comes to being an imperfectionist, many people might immediately think of a saying, "Done is better than perfect." This saying mainly means that imperfectionism, in learning or working, often helps you improve efficiency and speed up iterations. But what does imperfectionism have to do with unlocking hidden potential? Or how does perfectionism limit our potential? The book says that perfectionists often make three mistakes in the pursuit of perfection. First, they obsess over insignificant details, solving small problems while neglecting the broader direction of progress. Second, they prefer to solve simpler problems because they can achieve perfection in these areas. This makes them dislike risk and reluctant to tackle challenging tasks or develop new skills. The third is that perfectionists often dwell on the mistakes they've made, blaming themselves instead of focusing on how to learn and grow from those mistakes. That's why perfectionism can limit our potential. So there's a phrase in the book that I find quite interesting. The author says, if perfectionism were a drug, then the label on this drug would warn us of a common side effect, which is that it might cause developmental delays. The author also talks about how he transformed from a perfectionist to an imperfectionist. This story also responds to our initial curiosity about how the author became a national-level diver. The author first encountered diving in the summer of his freshman year of high school. He had always been a good student in school. A common tendency among good students is perfectionism, wanting to eliminate all mistakes and all poorly done parts. At the beginning of his diving practice, the author also carried this mindset into his practice. He wanted to perform every movement perfectly, aiming for that state where he would enter the pool without causing a single splash. He practiced very hard, but he found that this perfectionism slowed his progress, because he would spend hours trying to eliminate the splash when entering the water. Instead of striving to attempt more challenging movements, he kept doing the most basic movements, which were diving straight into the water, and never tried more difficult movements. Sometimes he would pace back and forth on the diving board, thinking about the details of the movement for 45 minutes, but never actually trying to dive in. Later, his coach told him that he was wasting time, that he was freezing his own progress. If he wanted to improve, he needed to overcome his perfectionism. So how do you change this kind of perfectionism? The method given in the book is extracted from a large amount of empirical evidence, and it's this phrase, aim for high standards, not strict demands. It means that you should focus your attention on a challenging goal, strive towards this goal, and not overly focus on whether every action in the process of pursuing the goal is perfect. Back to the author's diving story. His coach told him that there is no perfect diving in the world. Even in the Olympics, a score of 10 in diving doesn't represent perfection. It represents excellence. So the author began to change his thinking. He told himself, I don't need to be perfect, I just need to aim for a clear high goal and then challenge that high goal. So he no longer avoided difficult movements, began to challenge the limits of his abilities, and no longer blamed himself for mistakes, but focused on how to improve next time. It was with the help of this mindset that the author's diving improved very quickly, and he became a national-level diver before graduating from high school. This is the story of the author's change. He also mentioned a common worry among perfectionists in the book, which is, if I fail, will others think I'm incompetent? Here, the author gives a reassurance, saying that research shows that when people evaluate someone's abilities, they consider the person's peaks more than their valleys. For example, we all know that Shakespeare was a great playwright, a genius playwright. But if I mention a few play titles now, listen to this: I'm Watching You, Timon of Athens, The Merry Wives of Windsor. Do they sound unfamiliar? But these are also works created by Shakespeare, some of his more mediocre works. You see, we don't judge Shakespeare by these works, but by his best works. So, people judge your potential by your best moments, not those when you perform the worst. And to step back a bit, like many people say, you don't really need to care too much about how others view you, because pleasing everyone is impossible. The person you should please the most is yourself. So, on the path to excellence, the author suggests we often ask ourselves this question: if this is the only work of yours that people see left in the world, would you be proud of it? This questions our own hearts. Our purpose in pursuing excellence should not be to satisfy others' expectations, but to meet the standards of our own hearts. Deliberate play. All right, we've talked about personality skills and the process of unlocking potential. However, having personality skills alone is not enough. You also need motivation. This is similar to a car. It's not enough to have good performance, you need to fill it with gas so it can go far. So, how do you inject strong motivation into yourself? Fuel yourself, encourage yourself, or set rewards? None of these. These rely on external incentives. But this book advises us to find intrinsic motivation, a motivation that is continuous. It's like a car that doesn't need to be fueled from the outside. As it drives forward, it can keep filling its own gas tank. How do you do that? The method is in one sentence. Don't practice deliberately, play deliberately. Deliberate practice is already a well-known concept, and we also focused on it in the book, The Talent Delusion. This concept emphasizes that when you practice a skill, you need to have a strong goal orientation. You practice towards a goal that exceeds your current ability, and once you achieve it, you immediately move to the next level of difficulty, and so on in a cycle. But this process is often very hard, and hardness makes it difficult to persist. This is why many people know about deliberate practice, but only a few can ultimately reach an excellent level. Therefore, a better approach is to inject fun into the process of deliberate practice, turning it into deliberate play. Here, we'll talk about an example, which is also mentioned at the beginning, about how a girl who couldn't hear became a world-class musician. This girl is Evelyn Glennie, the world's first full-time professional percussion soloist, a three-time Grammy Award winner, and the first percussionist to win the Polar Music Prize, known as the Nobel Prize for Music. How did she do it? In her entire process of learning music, she approached it with the mentality of playing a game. For example, she would imagine her entire body as a giant ear, feeling the vibrations of different pitches on different parts of her body, then connecting them. For instance, high pitches resonate on her face and neck, while low pitches echo in her feet and legs. Also, she kept upgrading the game. Initially, she could only roughly distinguish pitches, but later she became more and more precise, eventually being able to distinguish notes just by the vibration felt on her fingertips. Her coach also continuously changed tasks and raised standards for her, such as having her interpret classical music in a modern style, never letting her feel bored. So she said, "For me, there's no difference between fun and effort." Evelyn's training process reflects many typical elements of deliberate play, such as making training formats fun, using diverse methods, and continuously setting higher challenges. These methods have been experimentally proven effective in various fields such as healthcare, arts and sciences education, and sports training, significantly enhancing learning outcomes. The author says another best example he's seen comes from a basketball coach named Brandon. This coach designed a game activity menu for his players, constantly engaging them in games, such as, you must score 21 points within a specified time, whether by three-pointers, jump shots, or layups, but each time you score, you must run to the center of the court and back. This simulates the breathless state on a real basketball court. Then he would continually shorten this specified time, making the game increasingly difficult. In the whole process of deliberate play, it's also important to note that you can't keep playing the same game. If you feel bored, then quickly switch. For example, Evelyn, whenever she felt bored, would switch instruments, playing different percussion instruments. And that basketball coach, he wouldn't let his players focus on practicing one skill completely before moving on to the next. Instead, he would mix challenges for different skills in one session. For example, he might have his players complete several different game challenges in 20 minutes. Hundreds of experiments have shown that when people alternate between different skills, they progress faster. This is true not only in music and sports, but also in painting, mathematics, and many other fields. And even small changes can be effective, such as switching between thinner and thicker brushes, or slightly adjusting the weight of a basketball. The basketball coach's training effects were also very significant. With his help, one of his players, who was shorter and thinner than his peers, grew to become one of the most famous and award-winning basketball players in the world, Stephen Curry. Of course, not everyone who trains this way can become Curry, but this method can indeed better unleash your potential. For example, an ordinary person spent 2 hours every day mimicking Curry's training. At the beginning, his three-point shooting rate was only 8%, but after 50 days, it reached 40%. So, although people often say, no pain, no gain, scientific research tells us that the fastest way to unlock potential is actually not through suffering, but by turning hardship into pleasure. I particularly like a phrase used in this book called play by play. Yes, our process of improvement should not be painfully persevering day by day, but should evolve in a playful manner, play by play. That's the essence of this book. If you think it is useful, you can find the links in the description below the video. Welcome to read it. You can also share this book essence with your friends. Congratulations, you've finished another book.